that whole part of the world where I won't go anymore, that whole separation that I won't feel, high in this house, in this hemisphere, in this artificial light that is artificial, in the earliest morning, dark, and pages and pens and an unfamiliar bed, in the foot curl, furniture, each rumble, when morning comes and it's still morning and it's still night. I married a dead girl. We were born in her bloom. Remember that fat bumblebee landed on a lamp? I opened the doors and I forgot, and the house got colder and colder. Where is this house? The seam between boards merely gains my attention. It's dark and thin. I monitor each situation, my bladder growing full. Climb down, climb up. What tree am I waiting? My whole life in weather, waiting for my raft. I'll fly to another island. I'll take a train. Already I know it will hurt. This is the hurt country. I came here to hold the hurt like a bird, like a tree. Traffic has rings. We watch it whirl around, damaging our night. Great continents hold the feelings and the ages. What is mine? Going blind. Great masses of them not going home. The country drew a line because of memory. One said, I feel my heart race ahead. In eternity, there is this ache. There is this wakefulness. Hi.
I was going to introduce you.
Do you want to do it? I would be totally, I knew when you walked in, I thought, this is her, do it, please. Please. What the hell? We don't always get to do what we, I would be like very honored.
Well,
This is Mary, my friend Mary Campbell.
yes. And this is incredibly my friend Eileen Myles, who I can't believe is even speaking to me.
Oh no.
But it has been I'm dressed for a funeral. That's
Yeah.
where I've come from.
Yeah.
But that's not the problem. It took me 2.5 hours to get here.
Oh,
It's a
God.
1 hour trip, as you know. From
How
Boston.
awful.
And I couldn't get Henry on the phone. So
And he didn't know your cell phone number. This
it's
isn't
because I have a brand new cell phone. That's
Yeah.
the whole problem. Well, I'm
let me
very
just-
flustered, but let me just in a very flustered way, very flustered.
Huh.
Because, of course, having to come straight from the funeral, I left my printed pages at home. But I do want to just say that there are very few writers in this world, in any language, including Icelandic.
I'm already so moved.
I would be, if I were you, I would just be fainting at this point.
Yeah.
Who actually have the gift to make you want to write. And to make you feel able to write. And to make you feel as if the everyday barf of your life
Huh.
can transform really the universe. So of course one of my very favorite things that you've ever written in a way is your essay about the mass barfing incident on the ferry boat that your mother did not accompany you on, because it's sort of like an extremely funny and very dark and horrible version of the glorious thing to me that is the writing and life, and they are very difficult to tell apart, except one takes lots of practice in editing, of Eileen Myles. And because I had to leave my my written introduction at home, which has, in particular, this is what makes me really sad, the long list of prizes and awards and recognitions and grant opportunities, and it's just extraordinary to me that this world that we know could actually have bowed down and welcomed and so on and so forth someone.
It's
so
come
close
late,
to the way
I'm
it
telling
runs.
you.
I know, but nonetheless, it is a long list, and that's what I really wanted to do, because it's the Bitcoin of poetry. What do you get except honor? But I don't have it with me because the funeral ran late, so I'm just gonna read you one little paragraph by Eileen Myles.
Eileen.
I know that.
Okay.
I was just testing.
I failed.
Yeah, no, actually, I did. Avant-garde means do it yourself. It's ironic, of course, if you consider the antipathy in America to experimental art, to the avant-garde, but the ultimate American artist. Yet every fool wants to build a house, has a Reader's Digest book about doing that. Martha Stewart, it's so American to think you can figure it out alone with a little help from your famous friend. Buy some book at the A&P, where everything comes from. if there's one little passage that over and over again makes me feel like I can go on, it's this essay that comes from. But let me just end by saying, as she said about John Cage's piece, in which at a certain wonderful moment, I've heard it, the radio turns on and it just randomly plays whatever it plays, but this time it was so late at night it played silence. And he let it play. That was the key. You have to bear silence in the 20th century. It's the only lyrical note. Perhaps it's our gift to the future. My apologies and my gratitude for you being here.
That's so... Thank you so much. Would you like to hear my first poem again?
Yes.
Okay,
We all would.
I'll read it different. Creeley always did this, right? So, in honor of him. Oh. What tree am I waiting? That whole part of the world where I won't go anymore, that whole separation that I won't feel high in this house, in this... I was in a loft bed in Belfast when I wrote this. High in this house, in this hemisphere, in this artificial light that is artificial in the earliest morning, dark and pages and pens and an unfamiliar bed, in the foot curl furniture, each rumble when morning comes, and it's still morning, and it's still night. I married a dead girl. We were born in her bloom. Remember that fat bumblebee landed on a lamp. I opened the doors and I forgot, and the house got colder and colder. Where is this house? The seam between boards merely gains my attention. It's dark and thin. I monitor each situation, my bladder growing full. Climb down, climb up. What tree am I waiting? My whole life in weather, waiting for my raft. I'll fly to another island, I'll take a train, already I know it will hurt. This is the hurt country. I came here to hold the hurt like a bird, like a tree. Traffic has rings, we watch it whirl around, damaging our night. Great continents hold the feelings and the ages. What is mine? Going blind. Great masses of them not going home. The country drew a line because of memory. One said, I feel my heart race ahead. In eternity there is this ache, there is this wakefulness. And I just want to say, it's so weird. I've been working for like 7 years on my selected poems, and I put them together, and then you know, like 2 more poetry books happened, and somehow or other that book didn't get published, and then you know, then you got to put those more poems in the selected, and then it gets bigger, and you're like, is it too big? And it had this one title for a while, and it was like, when I wrote this poem, it was so weird because I had this sensation that it wasn't like I wrote that poem before, but I wrote a poem that came from the exact same place and that felt the same when I was making it, and they were like 30 years apart. And so I had this whole like, then I was like, and then I stole this line from a story of mine, which is I must be living twice. And then I put that on the selected, and then I thought, that's the book, you know? And it's so weird how writing, you're in conversation with your own writing in all these ways, but I really do feel there's a very visceral thing about that. Poetry comes from all these different parts of your body, and even your whatever it is that's you that's not your body, but relationship and approximation and stuff. So anyway, so it's kind of a dark lifesaver. Summer. That morning in a light, that television show got born. I remember it in California. Every morning a show, and her wife in bed. Do I like her being there? But I have this now, my pride and my telephone and all my information. And this is called Prophesy, and I just want to say on East 3rd Street where I live in New York, there's a new taco, not so, like a year-old taco joint now called El Diablito. And so all these devils have started migrating into my poems. Really, because I'm always in there eating a taco with like, I'm playing with the devil's cock. It's like a crayon. It's like a fat, burnt crayon. I'm writing a poem with it. I'm writing that down. All that rattling heat in this room, I'm using that. I'm using that tingling rattle. That light in the middle of the room, it's my host. I've always been afraid of you. Scared you're God and something else. I'm afraid when you're yellow, tawny. White, it's okay. Transparent, cool. You don't look like home. My belly is homeless, flopping over the waist of my pants like an omelet. There better be something about feeling fat. What there really is a lack of emptiness. I'm aiming for some empty feeling. I'm going to get some of that, and then I'll be back. London Exchange. I have utmost respect for you, but in that moment, if I were to get out of your way instead of walking up the stairs to my home, I would have no respect for myself. I didn't know why you couldn't understand this when I told you. Instead, you screamed at me and told me I was rude. And then you said someone of my age should know, meaning that you were adding to my crime the fact that I am older than you. What am I to do? How many days have passed and I have no reason to think that your ancestors were stolen from their home in Africa, and because of my not knowing that this is true but thinking that it is possible, it makes me certain that respect next time would be for me to step around. Maybe I could say, quietly joining you for a moment in your vast and ancient sorrow, that was my home. There's so many complicated feelings that went into that poem, sort of, including read about and think about the slave trade. My devil. Before the sky opens and I drop my tiny ladder, I will inhabit the minds of dogs. Try me on for size. I will lean against the side of the building and smoke my blonde smoke. I will be inside my big car, something happens. That's what I say. There's always a recipe. I will recite my blonde list. I am the negation of you. Spells on. They're reeling us in. I want her thoughts. These cattle are mine. The salad's not bad. The devil is turning into everyone. I'm you for a while. Genitals itchy? That's me. I'm going to ruin your corn. It's not such a bad idea. Give me that poem. Give me that menu. Give me key. I don't need to come or go. I'm there. Mr. President, consider the wish of the tiny child. He is me. Does it taste good or does it look like it tastes good? You don't know? See? Memory. I lost it, that soft ball I threw in my room across many walls because I love toys. It warmed to my grip, became dirty, went splat, and I threw it against the writing on the wall, not hitting it exactly, but with a smile went out the door to rise over golden hills and descend with a family on a tram, ride through graves. You, irreplaceable, the best thing I had, my passion for you, I hope will continue. Summer. That rat's death. I'm proud that I fed my avocado to the mice this week. To see that scattered dust around the hole, I felt disappointed the apple had been spared the throbbing soup home. He said, it's a storm, I thought. Am I allowed to ask entire questions to take this space alone? You bobbing, you painted in my dog's face so carefully. Some kind of violence stretches the thought so long and allows the horns of words to touch each other. I think of him taking this much space. You don't know about this, dish towel for that matter. Who was I in another time, giving the tale so much? Puzzled that these spices went someplace else they did today in a sandwich. The empty hall into which I am reading, the empty country, an entire country, I wanted all of them. How I would like just one to pick things up in its cities and its rain. Its coast, the outer coat, 78 RPM, silly, newspapers, turning, cat on a porch, and other countries nearby and home ready for me when I have something to say or show. If ever, my empty mistakes, my empty vase, my empty powers of horror, my empty sex. Oh, bring the snow. That rat's death killed me because I would see it for days over and over, and it hardly could be the same rat whose insides whisked the street. We don't think that war is such an incredible mess, but it was just yesterday in an ancient poem years ago in the past. Dying, the balloon just bursts. It cannot bring you back again. The huge, cool breath, the lake doesn't want you anymore, or her arms, her sweet muff, or breast, the storm, the past. But no, I won't leave my cheese out for them anymore, and I must be the last person in the world in New York to read him who told us about mice that sing and fill empty auditoriums like us in our singing hearts, our formula for bringing it out. Pulling the receptacle apart, watch the tiny ship floating on it, smithereens. I duck the tail, edging over, taking a little bit more. The price of wider concepts is not choosing your job. The price of wider concepts is not choosing your drops of flicking me off, reminding me of you, everyone yell at once. Two rabbit legs jutting out. I keep my childhood around almost more than everyone, and a mouse can share my house, wet tootsie. It's kind of great. The whole thing is relative. Since I admired his mountains, I imagined I was in his landscapes. But opening packages is occurring all over the place. That's a strong image, and I feel like the smallness is directly rooted. Forgetting to use the new calendar I planned. These marks, I imagined, are the sources, all the milk flooding wildly over the rolling hills and out of the sun's comical eyes. Not tears, but creamy drops of mammalian weather. I'm given real information, and the most difficult part is blindly creating the space with the parts I can't see or even hear spread out, like the night in Paris when I walked to the movies. Onto my desk and the surrounding hills, into the bleachers where everyone is pounding themselves bloody in salute of the hunt. All I ever wanted was dinner, or at least his love. The delight I see in him is equally empty for anyone, and probably that's his stealth, inner lake. There's a car, a maroon, a colorless oval. I can imagine the seats and the feeling of hearing a song as we're weaving over hills. There's no break. Everybody I ever saw in my Seacoast community is already facing the problems, huge and gloomy, I grant you, and the night spills on my keys, which are splayed over the counter and outside its light. They're flipping their cards, every one of them.
What's the name of that poem?
That Rat's Death. So, yeah, and it was like, that was the revel. So it's like with this selected, then it was like, I was talking to this editor who maybe is going to be the editor of the book, and he was like, it has to be new and selected. And I was like, no, because I have this new book called That Rat's Death. And I feel like I've done that. I've been convinced to like take these 20 pages and put it in the front of all these old books, and maybe that's a book, but this is all like this week's imagination. So what I want to read now is some prose, and just to explain two things. One is that in this year's Whitney Biennial, it's like really very amazing that there's tons of writing in it. And one of the things is one of my publishers, the Semiotext, it did an installation, and so they asked a bunch of us who publish with them for like little short or long pamphlets, and so these are all like a installation, the biennial, which is really cool, particularly because what this is I'm like a kind of ex-Catholic, near-Buddhist person who sits sometimes and usually not very well in community. Like, I've never quite found a group of people to sit with, I think. But in New York, the New York Zendo is affiliated with this guy, Bernie Glassman, who's a guy in his 70s, and in the 70s he invented this new school of Buddhism, which like puts social activism together with Buddhist practice. And so his great idea was to do these homeless retreats, and I had been hearing about these for years and thinking I really want to do that, which is to act like ancient monks. And so it means that 8 or 10 of you, first you raise money because you are people that do have homes. You raise money from your friends, and we give that money to all the missions that feed the homeless. And then for 3 nights and 4 days, you just live on the streets of New York homeless, and you find cardboard and you sleep in alleyways, and it was and not in shelters. You just find a place to, it's even where, like I teach at NYU, and like NYU cops throwing us out of like, little sweet places to sleep, and it's really crazy. And even when the first time I did this, Occupy was in Manhattan, and we were like in Lower Manhattan, and somebody knew like a good alley for us to sleep in, so we're all like walking along, and suddenly we realize like a cop car is following us. And so we keep walking in the cop car. And finally, we get back to where Occupy is all planted, and the cop calls one of us over, and he said, if you don't get back over there with your people, we're going to arrest all of you. So we were like forced to be Occupy, and so then we slept with Occupy the first night. But this is the rest of the week. So it sort of explains what I just explained. But we met in Washington Square Park. Maybe I was. No, I don't know. We met in Washington Square Park. I was told to bring just my driver's license and a poncho and a change of socks. Jiru Jesse had sent the instructions, so I decided what he meant by socks was underwear. I bought an extra pair. We were to meet across from the dog run, and such words like across and dog run, in this park there are 2, were confusing, not just for me, but for everyone. So we filed in one by one, erratically, over an hour. I was the second female to arrive, and there were 4 men already, and they said hi, but continued to talk among themselves, which made me think, oh no. So I spoke a little with Judith to my left, and then insisted, as if it were my workshop, that now we go around and introduce ourselves. When everyone was there and we began the introductions in earnest, I realized that one of the difficulties of the retreat would be my inability to trust that the people I was with weren't dicks. They were Buddhists, and they were just waiting for the rest of us to arrive. Genro had a very nice, gentle way of speaking. In a situation like this, you observe the mannerisms of each individual in your small group in slow-mo. Unwittingly, as I met Scott and Judith and James and Koshin, certain people had Buddhist names and regular names. If you had taken vows, which only a few of us had. We had a choice as to which name to use, but it felt rude to not use the Buddhist name if someone had one. Undoubtedly, even Genro also had a regular name, but in his case, it felt even rude to want to know what it was, probably on the web. And Omri and Jiru Jesse were signing up for 4 days of looking closely and constantly at one another. How each of us was surviving, who was melting down, felt scornful at who we were, who didn't think we could find a place to stay, and who was unwilling to talk to the people we met in the missions. Not entirely true, but it felt that way, me, and who also was unwilling to beg, Judith. She tried, but I'm entirely getting ahead of myself now. We were told to bring no books, which is a relief since I kept changing my mind about which was the right book. We were told to bring a small day bag and a blanket to put in the bag, or we could wear it. But the bigger question among all these smaller ones was, who was I? Should I try and look like a homeless person? We were told not to wash our hair for like 5 days before. Easy, I never wash my hair. Thinking it looks less gray when it's greasy. And I also add grease to achieve a certain gunmetal effect. And to wear old clothes. But which old clothes? My hip ones? My best old t-shirts don't look homeless at all. My girlfriend offered me a cast-off Mickey Mouse t-shirt, which is perfect, but it didn't have a pocket for my glasses, and my one solid intention for this retreat was to not lose my glasses. So an old t-shirt of mine, one that she wears, a gray American Apparel pocket tee with a tiny tear around the pocket, got the job. And I wore a tank top underneath because I wasn't in any kind of queer-friendly world where my mannish flat chest with tits would translate. I just look like an old lost whore. So I needed the extra layer of binding, though not so much that, I was trying to control my image. Oh, no. I wore my dirtiest sneakers, but still they are bright green and a cool brand. I wore my favorite jeans, which were patched, but deliberately patched red. I brought a lousy hooded black sweatshirt, and as a finishing touch, I bought a jacket for $12 that was a shitty poly material with some crumbling writing in red that suggested it was no brand, pretending to be a brand. This is so homeless, right? I asked Leopoldine before I left. Oh yeah, she said, sipping her tea. I greedily stuffed it in my bag, and off I went, only to hit the street and realize I had forgotten my poncho. The poncho had been a trouble spot as well. I found a reversible poncho in a hardware store that cost $14 and was kind of a nice green. That's too nice, I thought. I found a pink neon poncho at the next hardware store for $3 that filled me with cheer. When we were standing in the rain getting drenched, everyone agreed mine was the best in terms of its capacity to fit over my backpack, yet still allowing my arms to move around. It seemed amazing to me. I was moving in a new economy where the cheapest could also be the best. For instance, it was. And now we began, which meant sitting there longer and looking at each other. We sat. At that point, it was revealed that all of us were a little bit Buddhist except one person, Omri, the Israeli, who wasn't Buddhist at all. He had never sat in his life. He worked with the homeless. He was getting his MSW, and he needed a little info about what we were doing. Genro gave him a few ideas about what to do with his tailbone and body, and just to let very little go on in his head. Meditating in Washington Square Park was weirdly satisfying. We were just letting go in the world. It was an overcast day, but overcast in that beautiful way in which you were living in a photograph. There was one photographer in our group, Jiru, who kept snapping away all 4 days, which I found weirdly reassuring. There were so many things we couldn't bring, and here was his very nice piece of equipment, acknowledging the construction of that whatever it was we were doing. Click, click. And now I understood where the photograph of the tall, white-haired man with closed eyes and the others had come from. I'm sure Jiru had taken it. After our silence, we did what Genro called counsel. He placed a square piece of cloth in the center of us and asked each of us to place an object of our own on the cloth. Someone threw in their glasses, another his prayer beads, and me my pen. I had brought a pen and a notebook, though I hadn't looked at the notebook much. There wasn't much satisfaction in writing. Not much impetus to do it at all. What's the point? Look where I am. In council, Genro explained we were to each speak from our hearts, and he indicated the place in his chest where a heart could be. He urged us not to plan our words, to wait until it was our turn, and speak directly from that moment. We could opt to be silent. By now, I had already become slightly acquainted with each person in the circle. I had watched each person sit in their relative comfort or unease. Actually, no one looked really uncomfortable. James, the youngest of us, 21, was stilly sitting in full lotus, and he looked like he had been a Buddhist or a monk all his life. And the one before that, too. Turns out he was a Catholic boy from Montclair living at home. One of the topics of the weekend was whether we could tell our families about this or not, which entirely hinged on what our relationship to our families was and who our families were. In James's case, he was living at home, had dropped out of college, and there was no possibility of them understanding this. I felt my siblings, if I spoke to them, would understand this. It amazed me to realize that spirituality was so acceptable in my family, and yet I was also entirely aware, probably for reasons that were not just about them and their prejudices, that they didn't like me. What does it mean to be disliked by your siblings, the people you grew up around? What judgment of mine of them or them of me had gotten us to this place? I could toss out a few details, and I did over the weekend with my fellow travelers, but the general feeling of it was what abided with me then and now. Because our street retreat was indeed, despite the endless walking around the city, very much a retreat, and certain ideas and obsessions stayed with each of us like friends or enemies for the whole entire 4 days. My disconnection from my siblings was one side of the coin, and my feelings of closeness with the men and the one woman I spent these days with was the other. Also, I was heartsick about my disconnect from my partner these 4 days. Not because of anything in particular, but a feeling of sadness and an examination of us and our bond that would not stop, but then for long periods of time it did stop. One of the miracles of the 4 days I lived on retreat in New York City was that I was simply where I was, looking at the street, having this conversation, meditating, and staring at the food I was ambivalent about eating and the people we were eating with. The community of people we met on our way were our job. And I want to say right away, I failed. My sense of being a failure at any job is key to my identity as a writer. And now perhaps I can gather the pieces of what we did and even contradict that thought. I'm changed by what happened, which was nothing. I'm changed by who we were and what I am now, and I don't know how to go on. I must write this, for instance, and do each moment, each instant of the day. I think Genro unveiled for us before we began walking what we would do in our 4 days. We would look for places to sleep. There will be some surprises, he smiled, when we asked him what that meant. His glint was actually reassuring. We would look for food, and we would sit and have counsel at least once every day. Right now, we are headed for the Bowery Mission. In the week or so before the retreat, I found myself looking more closely at the lines of people around Tompkins Square Park, waiting to get their plate of food from a truck. It was always religious, it seemed. Faith-based initiative, a phrase from the Bush years, instantly lodged inside my head. I will be standing there next week, I thought. The Bowery Mission was a few doors down from the new museum. I entered the retreat the same way I enter everything, selflessly and full of self. These are my friends, I wanted to tell them in the retreat, indicating that the new museum was somewhere where I knew people. That I'm actually a writer and an art critic, and this is so intense for me to be getting fed in the mission next door to this museum I work with sometimes. The feeling is not shameful, but I'm bursting with the urge to tell someone constantly, do you realize we are getting fed in my neighborhood? This is mine, all of it. I was the only East Villager in the group. Several of us, of course, had the typical, I used to live on 7th Street between B and C in the 90s, in the 60s, and so on. Our age span was pretty wide. I was not the oldest, but maybe one of the oldest 3. Soon I felt safe and good telling no one about my illustrious relationship to the new museum. Though repetitiously I thought to myself, I have to see that show, Nostalgia, a big survey of Eastern European art, and it's gone now. Someone told me little pieces of it are still up. The best of the show, gleamed Philip, a poet I know with boundless energy who does lots of everything. The truest thing about my life today is that I am getting better and better at forgiving, even knowing myself for what I don't do and what I'm leaving. I'm leaving everything and everybody. Is that like Satan? We just have to wait for a while, said Genro. We're standing outside Bowery Mission. You don't have to get in line, he softly explained. Just relax. Ginro is a very tall guy, so quickly his kind of gentleness is impressive. What is it? Taking up a lot of space, being quiet. He's definitely firm, but generally the message is to do less. For all of us to stop thinking so hard. He is doing a lot of our choosing for us, kind of a big brother, and when you sink into the groove of it, it's nice. I have to trust that this man I'm living with on the street for 4 days, is not a bastard. A lot of the people in the group smoked, and Genro seemed expert at rolling them. I thought about the lorry drivers in Wales when I was 22 who picked us up hitchhiking in the Snowdon Range and who would roll cigarettes with one hand while negotiating incredible curves. I love Wales. Would you like one, the driver asked, once his own was securely between his lips and he enjoyed our horror. Yes, I replied, and he would do it again. And then we were all smoking and ready to die. I am all about dying these days. I wanted to tell my friends everything that ever happened to me in my life. I felt like every story I did tell was like sticking a pin in a paper screen and all the light came pouring out, right, wrong. All of us were containers of our unconscious. I am dying, I am dying. I think it all day long, watching the energy buck and rise like I'm some kind of savage negotiating mind, examining its territory, where it's going, what it is, where I've been. We filed into the very antique-looking building on the Bowery that looked like an old theater and found ourselves in a pew-lined church with big murals and quotes from the Bible on the sides of the walls. I would sit here many days. An enormous pipe organ was at the front of the room, and there were a pair of pulpits on the stage in front of it. I examined the crowd while leaning in my pew like they would give me money. They didn't have a cent. Often I stuck to Judith like glue. At Washington Square Park, when we met, we were each assigned buddies. We got us. Dykes, of course, and neither of us drank. She is black, I am white. She's, I think, in her 30s, maybe 28. I'm 61. I didn't ask her if she wanted to be alone. I'd spot her in a pew. I just crammed in next to her in an aisle and sat there like an animal looking around. We waited about half an hour. We had to do this before we were allowed to eat. And we even had to wait outside for this. The good news is I was so alienated from this place where we ate the most that I mostly had no appetite at all, so I didn't object so much to waiting for the sermon. There was no rush. There was nothing pleasurable on the other side of it for me. My favorite thing was just sitting there because it was often better than the sermon or the food. Yet I was enraged we had to listen to stuff about God in order to eat. There was a bio of a man up over our heads, like a medallion on the wall of who in the 19th century had given this place the money to begin. And to think this was actually still going on, all of it. Same Gilded Age, same robber barons, same poor, and same unbelievably stupid and tedious pitches about God. Like God was the only vehicle to get you out of being poor and living on the street. If you believed in God, you could get a home. Hear this. Listen to this part now. The first guy was impressive in his interruptions, his ejaculations. He had a way of talking and listening to himself and being like the guy next to you in the pew going, listen up, get this, hear me now. It was like an attention-getting Tourette's. Pay attention to me. I rhythmize his talk, and it's the only part I got. Let him in. I mean, I feel like I'm doing a black, white working class guy from Pennsylvania. Let him in. That was the other idea. If you opened up to Jesus, if you let him in, open the door, you would be in a different land. Was it true? The possibility sickened me. Who wanted to get in my consciousness so bad that he had an army of people all over the world berating the most vulnerable, the stoned, the hungry, the poor, the mentally ill, and screaming at them, let him in? Because then what? I heard 6 or 7 men over 3 nights, and they all had a lot to say about women too, and that was the worst part. There were more men sitting in the pews, but there were plenty of women. There was a point in the sermon where people were supposed to come up, and a handful did. It seemed like a moment to get attention for the individuals in the pews, and yet it was the end of the show. It was time for us to turn it around, to join. And you could see the moment building from the raising hands at the front of the room. I went to a Kanye West concert once in Seattle, and in the giant stadium, the crowd responded to each of his songs with different hand signals. One song provoked a mass gesture of driving, turning the wheel. You could see the arms, thousands of them, turning the car together. Another was making a diamond with your 2 hands. Here it was simply raising one hand or two. It was kind of a salute to the speaker, an amen or I do. The bodies believe as much as the voice, and the eyes and the bodies were about to raise, but the hands came first. They stuck up and they waved like plants, like crops, ready to be cut down, I thought, by standing up and supporting this dude, by letting him in. Women went first. Yeah, I meant to say it was mostly women at the front of the room, waving and rising, and women ate first. After the reed-like salutation, we'd get up out of our rows and file in, another standing still in line. And I could feel men looking at me going, that's not a woman. Or is it? That I was white made it probably easier for me to be freakish, I think. It was a long cafeteria with a hot table up back. I looked at the kids serving us, all white kids. They wore plastic shower caps and shoveled the stuff onto our plates. Piles of macaroni with mysterious white sauce. Chicken, roasted or fried chicken. I don't know why this chicken made me so uncomfortable. I have eaten it, but I have hated it. I have to stop. I don't think I will eat chicken ever the same again. It looked extra bony, extra pulled right off some living creature, and then it looked shellacked somehow. It's like a bolt of chicken. It was a bright yellow brown like plastic chicken art, and when you pulled it, it was tough. It didn't taste good. It was tasteless, I thought. They had drummed the chicken out somehow. In all the stages of dying, the chicken fled. It was chicken corpse. How did it get this way? Why is it here? There were big fat rolls of very heavy bread and big sweet thick slices of chocolate cake or pie in a bowl, with thick sugary sauce, but nothing seemed good to me. Too snobby. That's how I looked to the white kids in the shower caps, I think. Not hungry enough. Was it just the suggestion that this was food for the poor, giveaway stuff, and if you asked any questions like, what is that sauce? Or, no thanks, I don't want that, you were looked at like you didn't belong here. And I felt like I didn't, so I could assert myself and betray my wrongness, but the piles of green salads as you left, so many salads from Trader Joe's, several days old, browning in their plastic with their own little packets of dressing inside. I grabbed a couple, everybody did. I'd pour the dressing on the salad and take a forkful and think, And then look around, and people were shoveling it in and barely lifting their eyes, and no one wanted to look at me because I was clearly a tourist. It seemed Judith could get a little something going with the people. She was young, and they wanted to take care of her, and she was black, which was what 3/4 of the people here were, and maybe they believed she really was here and didn't want her to feel bad. I just couldn't eat. The white people scared me the most. The junkie couple in front of me. He had been handsome, maybe, and still had some charm still, bristling hair and skinny, and still handing her a line. He was blazing with love for himself. Here. And probably she was just so fucked up because she was kind of beautiful, and he had his arm around her shoulders, and she seemed completely enthralled, but he was probably already selling her. There's no way in the world that wasn't already going on, and they were eating here. I just hated him, and I wanted to rescue her. There was a woman about 70 I followed every night. She sat at the front, and occasionally she turned, looking back over the room as if it were hers. The posture suggested a little bit of sanity, so I thought, what about her? She sort of reminded me of my sister's partner. She had white gray hair and tight curls. Her face was wide, like Judy's. She had a funny walk, and when I stood outside after dinner, I watched her heading back to wherever, and the walk, of course, was because she had sneakers on about 2 or 3 sizes too big. I sat with her one night, this was me trying to meet people, and I saw the scars on her forehead and felt the glaze of craziness or medication hit like a wall that made me feel so far away from her and myself. I just thought, what am I doing trying to make friends with my sister's girlfriend through you? I threw my food in the trash quickly and got out of here and stood outside waiting for my group. I thought, this has got to end. I'm not even doing it. I'm just here. Which was long, and this wait was hard because the men ate later, and I even think they made friends. I thought, I am the loneliest person in the world, and Judith came out and was looking for a smoke. I'll find you one. I volunteered. I just wanted to be useful. Now we go to Whole Foods. Whole Foods, I asked with my face. I go there in the afternoon to work sometimes. I live nearby. Lots of light upstairs during the day, the long tables, and unless some generally young woman is suddenly in a loud cell phone conversation or sees a friend, usually it's quiet. Bathrooms, said Ginro. Oh. There was this curious blending of the life I know and the life I am on now. What's the difference? The accustomed to now had a plunging safeness and a constant wariness about the people who surrounded me, whether or not they thought I was one of them. Returning to my group always restored me to a third thing. I was floating in the world, in between my life and theirs, on what felt like a raft. I thought about that phrase, the floating world, referring to prostitution. It fascinated me, the world in between, the invisible place where people go. It was the retreat itself, the security we had formed, the Sangha. We were like a sub-Sangha. People were figuring out ways to make phone calls. Turns out you can just go up to people in Whole Foods and ask them if you can make a call. Sometimes someone will ask if it's local, which is crazy. On a cell phone? What's the difference? I thought I was away. I told Leopoldine, I don't know when I'll call. I don't know if I can make a call. We were like 7 blocks away from where she was at work. I thought of her tenderly. I wanted to be away. But people were calling and I noted that. I wasn't them. I brushed my teeth. That's what I wanted to do. I washed my face. We had only been on the street 5 hours now, but I could feel my rituals and my needs to protect myself from the world kicking in. I travel a lot and often bring home the stupid little soaps. One chain gives you these green leaves of soap. Is it a Weston? I really like them. They remind me of Peter Pan, like a frond of soap. That made me happy. I could bring that. If I look closely at what I do, I'm really crazy. I spend all my time trying to slip myself into a secret fantasy. You made a call? I asked Omri. Yeah, he grinned. People were calling their kids. Scott was this guy who had been in the military. He looked like a guy who could be on the street, a little grizzly. It agreed with him. He kept talking about his day-old beard as if it were unusual, but he looked so normal. His discomfort was what was strange. He kept referring to himself as a type A male. I thought, what's a type A male doing on a retreat? But he seemed sort of like our warrior. He was energetic and impatient. If we got in a fight, we'd be okay. I bet Ginro could talk them out of it. But people like that can get shot, so you're never really safe. Ready, said Ginro. We're going to look for some place to sleep downtown, but first we're going to stop off at a mosque. Really? Walking becomes a different activity when you have no alternative. You're doing it with a group. You're not on a schedule, not one that is known to you. And again, it's a city that I've lived in virtually all my life, since my 20s, so what's that? More of me here than anywhere else. It's beautiful. You begin to walk in the nature of it. Its grayness, its smearing lights and human traffic, the stops and the waiting, the names of the streets. You look at a street name for a long time that you've looked at before, that you know, but now you stand there liking it. The energy is interesting too. There's a point in meditation between the breaths that's sometimes described as glowing. Once you have a full chest of air, you stay at that point and feel it circulate in you, and there's a kind of radiance within before you push it down and through. It feels like forever, that pause. From accounts of Auschwitz, I have had a sense of how much humans can do if they are forced. And often I've happily dropped that hat over the difficult activities. This is the enragingness of privilege. Look, I'm walking for hours. I'm lifting things like the people in the camps. Is it possible to be in another time and lifting with them? Is it always only privileged vacationing? Why not spiritual canvassing, interrogating other pasts for the meaning of what you are doing now that you don't entirely understand? I relish the opportunity to be in a hole in my life with a group who were quickly no longer strangers. We were simply walking downtown. We're going to a mosque, Ginro announced. Since I wasn't sure I liked him, yet I was intensely examining his hair. Whiter than mine, with kind of a short shag. I've been told that if you want your hair to stand up, you keep it short. So his was kind of a curling up in a Warren Beatty shampoo way that I thought was unfortunate. This is me. I'd be surveying what kind of group we looked like. These 5 men and 2 women, these 6 white people and 1 black woman, these 3 old people and 4 young people. I forget to put my own name on a list. Eileen. A mosque? Yeah, and Ginro paused in his slightly open-mouthed style that became somewhat charming. I used to go there a lot, he said at one point. I thought about all the points in the life of someone who is a professional spiritual person. I had been in a million poetry scenes, literary ones, queer scenes. You just kind of accumulate these kinds of experiences for years, and they become the blanket of what you know, what you hold yourself in. I'm not sure it's that way for everyone. Years of thinking only reveals that people think quite differently. Tribeca still has the baby doll lounge, where I remember standing with a bunch of poets when I first had come out. I was pontificating on what kind of sex I, a now fully informed lesbian, could be certain the woman on stage liked by watching her dance. But she was working, not showing herself. When I got sober, I had friends who also worked there. Now I see the sign and I remember all the stories. Let there be neon. I always think it's gone. I remember the brief place of honor it had to people like me in the Soho of the 70s. It was what people would show you in a touristy way. There was a great luxury to going into a neon store on West Broadway and seeing little glowing pigs, eyeglasses, and waves. My friends shot a poetry video there. It was considered so cool. But we weren't cool. I'm sure the early Sohoites hated Let There Be Neon and regarded it as the end of their private neighborhood culture. It was showy. It was kitschy nostalgia. Here it is, said Genro, pulling it open. There was a group of people seated quietly on the floor around a blonde woman sitting on a cushion in a small square hat. She was Sheikha Faraya, the imam. It felt a little bit like a talk show. People were sitting close around her, and the most immediate seemed to be discussing a problem or sharing good news. Someone had had a baby. Someone had finished medical school. The radicalness of there being a female imam was only the beginning of the weirdness here. As time passed, I saw several skinny butches in the same square hats as the men mostly wore. Apparently, this was a mosque that was open to gender drift. The atmosphere was warm. There was tea on tables in the back and small bowls full of almonds and dates, and I dove. In 4 short hours of being on the street, I had already retreated to the starvation mentality or reality of early sobriety. If there was ever free anything, cookies or coffee at meetings, I chowed down ferociously, terrified of hunger. And the snacks at the mosque were first rate, and embarrassingly, I kept returning to them like I was poor. Then I sat myself against the wall at the back of the room. I observed my companions doing what we were encouraged to do. Scott was moving around, chatting people up. We were on break, and quickly Genro was talking to Sheikha Faraya. She had called his name delightedly when we entered the room, and now they were completing the bargain. Sheikha Faraya was queenly. She seemed like a woman from another time. She was royalty, and her reign was very benign. Also, in another way, she seemed unquestionably hip. She was blonde, of an amorphous age, perhaps 50, and resembled a very well-maintained Joni Mitchell. If Joni was grand, and she is, isn't she? It was hard to believe, watching them, that she and Genro had not been lovers, but the feeling in the room was that everyone was lovers, with her as their queen, but also with each other. This was not the vibe I got when I first stepped into meetings, and I don't know why I keep remembering that cultural moment, but the whole weekend felt like a deepening shift into another reality, and each component of this new existence I was in felt different, and this part, this space, this room, was a sweet one. A man introduced himself to me in one of the intervals when I was again up on my hind legs getting more nuts. Hello, is it your first time here? I am C. His name was at first unpronounceable to me, but the man was patient, so I felt willing to get it right, and arrived there I did. It's gone now. He told me that he was a professor of engineering at such and such a school. I told him I was a poet, which is always a great way to test the waters. You instantly learn a lot about a person when you tell them that. I love poetry, he replied. Would you tell me some, he asked. I don't think I can do that right now, I replied. But some other time. Sure, of course, he replied. Do you know the poetry of William Butler Yeats? I was in a time when people were constantly asking me the same question. I read him again, and I could see why. I'm chiefly a fan of the Crazy Jane poems, I said. Oh, how interesting, C replied. I think poetry is wonderful because people show their souls so readily in it. And I think it helps other people share theirs. Exactly. Are you a friend of Sheikha Faraya? Have you been here before? No, this is my first time. Oh, you must meet her. Come. I was being dragged up through the crowd to meet Joni Mitchell. She was giving closing hugs to a new initiate. There was a bright glow surrounding her, it was true. I wasn't afraid to meet this kind leader, whereas I am generally afraid of authority figures, and as a result, I often act unfriendly. Yes, I'm afraid of them. Sheikha Faraya, he called her name. I would like you to meet Eileen the poet. Oh, we love poets here, Sheikha Faraya said. How did you happen to come to us tonight, Eileen? I'm part of Genro's group. Genro is a very good old friend. All the roads were continually being stroked, all the connections, all the history. The time had gone into deepening the connections. Yes, I was a part of that. So what kind of poetry are you working on now, Eileen? Do you have any special project? I am working on a book about a dog. A very special dog, I quickly explained. Animals are our friends, she smiled. That's important work. The important beings on the planet are not all humans. Welcome, Eileen. I'm very glad you are here. And then she went and kissed somebody or called their name, and I moved away from her warmth. C smiled at me, and I felt he had done his part, and now I was on my own again. I saw a carpeted staircase. Upstairs, I reasoned, had to be where the bathroom was. After I've eaten, and especially after I've been social, my next impulse is usually to hide. I love the toilet. I didn't really need to go to the bathroom, yet this is the way I run my life. For years, getting out of the classroom, of work, even alone in my apartment, drinking enormous amounts of fluid so I can go into the tiny shrine, close the door, and look at myself. Pull my pants down and produce something. Reorganized, return to the source. Reorganized, return to the source, I step out. It's like rebooting. I could see that the room upstairs, the bathroom was for teaching children. Their drawings covered the walls. Tiny furniture sat in the corners, and the floor, again, was covered with rugs. I could do more than go to the bathroom up here. I could lie down. Was I sleepy? No, but I felt welcomed in this place. I decided I could use it however I liked. I had met people, now I could nap. Or just dream. I needed to be alone. I had to get enough of that at all times in my life. That was the important thing, to be alone. I could hear the sounds of the gathering coming to order downstairs. There was someone who would proudly introduce our mother, or our, whatever they called their female imam. Her voice entered the fray, and quiet surrounded her strong, gentle tones. Is Eileen still here? I imagined her cupping her eyes as if there were too much light. I don't see where Eileen is in the room. We just had a very good exchange about animals, and I have a story I would like to tell her. I jumped up off my rug and bolted down the stairs. Good, good, I'm glad you're still with us. You know her, Scott murmured as I sidled up against the wall. No, I just met her tonight. In some of my proudest moments, I just keep looking straight ahead. I can't stand a direct gaze when I'm proud. Or I'm afraid they'll see a proud little doll in my eyes. Is it that? Or is a person that has something to be proud of just too greedy to look you in the eye and tell you how marvelous it feels? But she was telling me a story, and I didn't know Scott enough. She was driving down to the city from upstate, and she had gotten to the West Side Highway, and along the guide rail, just sitting there, was a chicken. A big, wondrous chicken. It was a bird that didn't belong on the side of the road, and it was certain to meet soon with destruction. It was just sitting there, measuring the flow of the traffic, and was clearly interested in going across, and flying wasn't an option for some reason. Because it was hurt? Chickens are maybe only capable of short flights. And a mom was about to drive by, right by the bird, and she knew that there would be a moment when she would probably could just reach out and save the bird from what was undeniably great peril. But the moment passed. I didn't do it, she said. Do you know this moment, she asked? Have you ever had this feeling? She was asking a room full of humans this, and that was so beautiful to me, that there was the possibility for a moment that only she was wounded by this loss of not protecting something from its doom. I didn't do it. For whatever reason, some other thought passed through my mind, and then the bird decided to go for it. I saw the bird hop down and make it across at least one line of traffic, and then I didn't see the bird anymore. It broke my heart that I was that unconscious, that I could see the thing, but that I didn't act. I couldn't. Yet I was just an animal, just like that bird, and I could have protected him, but I didn't. And I think we can't protect all living beings, but we must try, and we will fail. We will fail a great deal. I hope this is some good to you, Eileen. She smiled gently at me. It is. I had an alone moment with her, and I thought, I will come back here some Thursday night. Why not? I could do that. Soon the room was sailing in unison. It was the most beautiful thing, swaying in time with a chant. I think there was some recorded music in the background. It went on for a very long time. I had to be seduced by it. It was all around me like at a sports event or a political action, and I had to succumb. And I became part of the physical wave that filled everyone for, I don't know, maybe half an hour. You swayed and clapped. I did too. I looked around for members of my group, and some of them were, and some weren't. It died down slow. You could see that people would be talking afterwards for a while. Ginro caught each of our eyes. Come on, we have to find a place to sleep, he smiled. Thank you. Thank you.